So I want to welcome everyone. We're at Mentor North Carolina. We're starting a new series of webinars, this being one of them. And I'm going to host a series called kind of basically Coffee with Bud. It's a little bit maybe late in the afternoon for coffee. Maybe that's a little bit more of a breakfast thing, but that's all right. Sometimes we need a perk up at this point. So there's a couple of goals of this series, and that's actually some of these conversations I want to be very practical. Some I'd like to be focused on what are innovations in the field, and others in terms of like, maybe we'll bring in some good thought-provoking subjects as well too. But the kinds of things hopefully that are very relevant to you that are working directly in the field. So briefly, Mentor North Carolina. We have a couple of core goals in the state of North Carolina. That is to increase the number of mentoring relationships, increase the quality of those relationships, and then finally, a major emphasis on racial equity in the field. And one of the things that in particular that I focus on is we have grant funding to provide free technical assistance, which is in part kind of a little bit behind what's going on with today's phone call or webinar. So a little bit about me. I am the former CEO of two different nonprofits. I built one from scratch up to $1 million a year. So I know what it means to be in a small nonprofit, and I've also run a mid-sized profit that had a budget of about $2.5 million a year. And I was also the CEO of an education technology company. I also have background in research. I've been involved in a number of research projects, both as a vice president of a small research company, but I've done projects with Duke, UNC, Harvard, quite a number of different fields. So I tend to be focused on what really works, what really changes the lives of young people and their families. And then in this role, I'm the director of technical assistance and leadership development. So I'm all about the idea of like, how do we make mentoring programs even better than they are and help them do it faster. So we really try to be that resource to help organizations grow and be very effective in their mentoring projects and all. But that's enough about me. A few things just in terms of the webinar today. One is to let you know we're gonna have a question and answer session at the end of the talk by Frank. But as we're moving along, you can put questions into the chat if you want to raise any questions. And my colleagues, Charmaine or Raimundo, are going to actually be monitoring those. And they may stop the conversation if they feel like it's an urgent point that it would be really good to bring up with Frank at that point as well too. And then finally, just to let you know, we are recording the session so that if you want to come back to it, it will be posted at a later date on our website, or if you want to send other people to it in terms of if you felt it was valuable and you have colleagues that want to see it today. So today's session is on one of the key issues that we know are really important to nonprofits and mentoring organizations, knowing that mentoring also happens in public school settings and other settings as well too, but it's money. You know, you can have a great program, but if you don't have money, you're very limited in terms of what you can do to it. And we know from our surveys and our conversations with mentoring organizations that it's one of the top 2 or 3 concerns that everyone has. So we thought it would be really important with this conversation to start with that conversation. So we brought in Frank Pollock, who is a consultant with Mentor North Carolina, as well as he has his own consulting practice. He has a really strong background in entrepreneurship and marketing, and we feel like that's a real interesting perspective to bring into the nonprofit sector, particularly because one of the ways I think of this work is that nonprofits are really kind of a version of social entrepreneurship. So I think there's a clear connection. But one of the wonderful things about Frank is that with his experience and his background, he can help pull some of the tools that have been very successful in different parts of the private sector for us to use as well too. Frank, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more and get us running.
Okay, so as Bud said, I'm Frank Pollock. My company is the Pioneer Group, and we work with high growth technologies to do marketing, innovation, strategy work. I like to tell people we do 3 things really well. We develop marketing strategies, we deploy marketing technology stacks, and then we drive results. And I'll get into a little more of that kind of stuff in just a sec. But let me, I've got some slides here, and I'll go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see those. Now, while I'm doing that, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how we're going to make sure that you're able to stay engaged with the conversation. I know how important it is to make sure that this is an interactive conversation. Love, feedback, thoughts, questions, anything. Make sure you get those into the chat. But before I get into the meat of the conversation today, what I want to do is tell you a little bit about myself. The marketing, unlike the legal field, unlike accounting, unlike medicine, we don't have an accrediting exam. We really have our experience and our accomplishments. So I'm going to share those with you so that you can have a fuller understanding of those, and you can give the remarks that I have later the appropriate credibility. So after I got my MBA from UT Austin, I worked at Frito-Lay's corporate headquarters where I did sales and marketing strategy. I would guess that a few of you have had some Doritos or Lay's potato chips in the course of the last 30 days. I worked at General Mills, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Betty Crocker brand. I was helping to research and market and sell that. And during the COVID crisis, I'm sure that you have used some soft soap to wash your hands at some point. So another brand I worked on, I actually sold Colgate-Palmolive's products to Target's headquarters in Minneapolis. Now, I left to corporate America and started my consultancy, and I worked with much smaller companies like Sport Tracks, which is based in Durham in the American Underground. It's actually a two-person operation. which is a social commerce startup, and then Thinking Maps. If any of you have worked in higher education or in K through 12 education, you're probably familiar with Thinking Maps and their learning tools. In addition to working for large corporations and as a consultant, I've served on boards in Raleigh, in Austin, in Dallas, in Minneapolis, and now I chair the marketing committee for Kids Notes. So I know a fair amount about the nonprofit landscape. And I've also been involved with technology companies. I've been the co-founder of a couple, and I'm an advisor for a couple now. So the reason I bring that up is I've seen a lot of similarities between startup technology companies and nonprofits. They start with a small team. They're very passionate, and the energy and the camaraderie are deep and strong. They're under-resourced. Both organizations lack the tools that they need, may not have all the skills that they need. If they need to go out and sell, they figure out how to do it. Don't have capital. On the technology side, hey, you got to go out and find customers and raise capital. And on the startup side, you have to figure out ways to get people engaged and to contribute. And they're both taking on a really big challenge. So the reason that the passion and the depth of that passion and the energy to go after this challenge is really what motivates you. And the last thing is a can-do mentality. They're both started by folks who believe they can truly make a difference. And regardless of the challenges in front of them, they're built to handle those. But there's an interesting phenomenon I noticed as I served on nonprofit boards and worked with startups. There's a terrific framework of stuff that helps the early stage technology companies to really move forward and to structure themselves, to ideate how they're going to change, and then to become more sustainable organizations. I don't see the nonprofit sectors applying those tools. So after chatting with Bud about the survey results, I thought, hey, let's bring some of those tools from the technology sector over into the nonprofit sector so that they can become more sustainable organizations. They can learn how to become better marketers and eventually to raise money more effectively. So before we get into this, let's hop into the chat. If you can let me know the top tool that you're using for fundraising right now. If it's email, if it's social media campaigns, if it's more traditional stuff, you can let me know that in the chat. And if my producers can share some of those or make sure we can access the chat. Let's see what we got here, guys.
So it's looking like a range from grants, fund run, email and social media,
Okay.
Fundraising campaign, newsletters.
Cool. All good stuff. me 1 second here. I apologize. There we go. Okay. All those are good stuff, but we can talk about events, and we can talk about digital stuff as well as more offline methods when we get further into the fundraising. But for our conversation today, we're going to chat about the business model canvas. I imagine some of you are familiar with that, but we'll talk about how it applies to your marketing strategy, how you can use some of those, how you can use additional tools to create a brand, how you can subsequently start executing on online fundraising. I'll share with you some of my favorite resources that I think will make your lives much easier in all these areas, and then we can have some questions and answers. So, the business model canvas. Canvas was really, it was a book that was open source going back in 2010. But the idea was there was this phrase that was constantly in the business world about, you know, our business model and our business model, but there was actually no definition of it. So the author worked with a bunch of people to get their input and to craft what a business model really looked like. So if you look over on under the profit centers on the right side of your screen, you'll see customer relationships, customer segments, channels, and you'll see the revenue. That's really how we're going to talk about marketing when we get into that conversation. But your marketing strategy is going to be lifted right from those blocks. In the center is the value proposition. And it's really the problem that you're going to solve and how you plan to solve it. Over on the left side, you've got the cost centers. So who you're going to partner with, what the activities that you're going to be engaged in, what the resources you need, and then the cost structure. So anytime, for example, you know, if you had an in-person mentoring program, during COVID, you probably had to transition to an online mentoring program. So what does that look like, and how do you put that together? And then, you know, so you can look at, you know, the same customer segment, a slightly different value proposition, and a different channel of delivery. Do you then want to impact your customer relationship by, you know, communicating that you are now using a different type of method, a different delivery channel, and that you're now, you know, a hybrid model, or you're an all online program? And so so over on the left side, how do you deliver that? And then how's that going to change the cost structure of your organization? So let's dive a little bit deeper into the value proposition. This is really the core of what's going on. And this is a simple exercise that I use with a lot of clients. It's designed to help you distill your value proposition. Now, a couple things about value propositions. Value props are different depending upon the audience that you're talking to. And they're different for different organizations. So if you think about, you know, the organization of 100 Black Men Triangle East, they have a STEM Learning Academy that meets on Saturdays for, you know, several weeks. They have financial literacy, so more life skills training, and they have college readiness, college preparedness. So how to, you know, prepare for standardized tests, how to, you know, look for financial aid, and how to eventually apply to a university and explore all of your options. You know, a different perspective could be, you know, the Boomerang organization in Orange County. They work with people, with students who have been short-term suspended, you know, 2 to 10 days, and they want to make sure that they stay on track academically, but they also provide them with counseling in order to identify the reasons that they found their way to the suspension, and to identify strengths that the students use during the time that they spend with them. So the student can now build confidence and strengths and stay away from challenging areas. The idea is that you want to have a very clear communication of what it is that you deliver, or your product, who you're helping, what the job to be done is, and how you do that. And in doing so, you form the foundation of the organization, but also you refine the organization, but it also leads you to more effective communication. If it's going to be in digital communication, if it's in-person communication, if it's for grants that you're applying for. So why don't we take just a moment here, since you guys have had a chance to look at the screen and understand this. And if anybody wants to take a shot at crafting a quick draft of the value proposition. So we can put those into the chat, and our organization, our product, our mentoring program helps a specific segment. There's a goal that they want to have, the job to be done by delivering on specific type of mentoring, specific type of education, specific type of structure. So as those start to pop up, Bud, can you share those with us?
Yes, I would do that. And I was also going to ask you, could you make the connection for folks, because some of this language is coming from the private sector, so sometimes it's a little foreign to folks working in the nonprofit or public sector. If you could connect kind of this idea of customer segments with value proposition, so people kind of understand a little bit more about how those two relate.
Oh, that's an excellent question, which leads into my next slide.
Oh.
So the customer segment, so this is really your target audience. So you can have multiple customers for a particular organization. The young people that you serve that's a customer. Your funders are customers. Volunteers are customers, each of them in a different sense. It may not be the sense that you have, a transaction, but they come for a reason and you're delivering something to them. So the idea is that, not all stakeholders are going to be customers simply because I may, support you from a distance. But what you want to have is the parts of the organization where you have direct relationships and regular interactions are highly important interactions, like a large-scale grantor. Those are folks that you want to consider customers. Now, these are personas, and a persona is really a description of what the ideal customer looks like. So you want to capture both demographic information, age, income, ethnic background, as well as behavioral information. So what their interests and passions are, to understand why they want to be involved, why they're a great kid for your program, or why they want to donate. So here's an example of what I mean. As the marketing chair with Kids Notes, one of the things that I've learned, or I've learned a number of things, but when I look at our web traffic, we started in Durham 10 years ago. We then opened up locations in Raleigh, and a few years ago we opened up locations in Chapel Hill. 40% of our web traffic comes from Durham. 40% of our web traffic comes from Raleigh, and 20% from Chapel Hill. Now, the majority of our individual donors tend to be suburban, or they tend to be white women who live in North Raleigh, in Forest Hills, in Trinity Hills, or within Orange County. So what we want to do is understand who they are, where they live, why they donate, and what makes them passionate about the organization, so that we can have a value proposition that resonates with them. Because they may be looking to understand, they may be passionate about helping underserved young people in the community. The flip side of that is parents want to lift up their kids and have them show excellence. And it's a different type of value proposition.
So Frank, we've got one brave volunteer put up their quick value proposition in the chat section for you. And I'll just read it out loud for everyone. Our youth meetups and mentor program help youths in Orange and Durham counties who want to improve life skills and have optimism about their future by offering tools, guidance, and support in implementation.
Okay. I really like that. So, now then the value prop is going to be different for, depending upon the audience, so the customer segment, the value proposition is going to be slightly different in how it's communicated. And it's going to be the foundation of all of the topics, which leads me to my next slide. The three key questions you're trying to nail down with the value proposition and the customer segment. Who is your buyer? What are they buying? Why do they buy? You can easily substitute who is your donor, or who is your, who's your donor, what are they donating, and why do they donate? It can be, like I said, cash. It can be, tools that you, with Kids Notes, it might be instruments. And why do they do that? What motivates them to do that? But when you can answer these three questions, if it's for a grantor, what type of granting organization is it? What are they willing to grant you? And then why are they granting it? But you want to ask each of these questions for each of the segments to help you refine a clear understanding with your organization. And having that enables you to sell more faster or to scale faster. So I thought I saw a hand raised. Did we have another question or a hand raised there?
Let's see, Charmaine, could you show that for us? Or Raimundo?
Okay. So transitioning from that, I want to talk a little bit about branding. So heading into the chat, we've got a quick quiz for you. What is a brand? A logo and a name. B, a promise. C, what they say about you. Or D, none of the above. So if you can give your answer in the chat, please. So Bud, what are we seeing there?
So we have a couple of C's, we've got a D. Still waiting to see if we have an E, possibly all of the above. A B. Another D, so we've got, so far I'd say C's and D's are the leading a little bit here.
Okay. So a brand is really what they say about you. You're trying to cultivate a specific reaction based upon how you're initiating the conversation and the experience that the organization, the people have with the organization. Now, I realize that a lot of you run smaller organizations, and your first reaction will be, I'm not, this guy's worked with, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. I don't have those kinds of resources. Branding may be, a little, much for me to deal with. I'm just trying to get day to day. Completely understand. I want to take a moment to explain to you why I think branding is so very important. Now, in high school chemistry, I learned that salt, the chemical formulation from the periodic table, is NaCl. If it's not NaCl, it can't be salt, which literally means the two pictures of the products in front of you, they have to be the same thing. But Morton Salt is 2/3 of the market, and they charge a 50% premium to Kroger Salt. So I say that to make the point that if you aren't thinking about your brand and the experience that your key customers and your key constituents have with the brand, then you're missing a terrific opportunity to enhance your the online fundraising and revenue opportunities. It's a huge opportunity you're missing to recruit additional volunteers who will be mentors. So that's the power of branding. Go ahead, Bud.
I want to ask you, if you go back to personas for a moment, if you could use like an example of, if I'm sending out like a fundraising newsletter to some of my individual donors, I mean, how do, and let's say I had 3 personas that were developed like you had up on your thing. How would, how does that change or not change what I'm doing with that newsletter?
Can you hold that question for a few slides and we'll get exactly into that issue?
Perfect.
Okay. So how do you build a brand? Now, this is a tool that's taken literally from a book called The Ad-Free Brand. It was written for early stage technology companies. In fact, the folks who did the branding at Red Hat put together this model. But let me quickly orient you to the information that you're seeing. On the vertical axis, you have the external and internal. Across the top, the present and the future. And the 4 questions ask really, what do you say about your organization currently, internally, and what does the external community say about you? Now, if there's a difference between those two, that's called a brand gap. So if I say that I'm, there's one organization, there are a couple organizations I know who profess to be, leadership development organizations. They're viewed as mentoring organizations. So the idea is that you want that alignment at a basic level. And then the future of your organization. Who is it that you want to reach? How do you want to reach them? How do you want to help them? Versus how people see you in the external community. And then right in the center, you want to create a few words that help you to distill that down very simply. So if you think about Kids Notes, which is an organization that we teach young people in Southeast Raleigh and East Durham how to play symphonic instruments for 10 hours a week. Our hope is to inspire social change with music. And we literally have a brand positioning of collaborate, inspire, and change. And all of our messaging is influenced by that. And we use that very messaging when we prepare grants at a number of levels, when we do our individual communications, when we talk to our partner schools. This is the way that we frame our communication. It leads to a bigger series of blocks that we have, which I'll talk to you about in just a sec when I get down into the email and how those should be personified. So a lot of you are familiar with the donor funnel. Now, I've actually inverted the funnel, and professional marketers tend to look at it, this way. The brand is really important for building awareness, but it's not just awareness of the organization. It's awareness of the problem and awareness of the solution that you provide. So let me go back to Boomerang for a second in Orange County. I was unaware because I don't have kids in the Orange County school system. There are a number of kids, a few hundred kids who are suspended short term in Orange County every year. There's an impact on their long-term, there's a correlation with their long-term academic success, with behavioral issues, the things that you would naturally imagine. And Boomerang has a well-defined process that includes an intentional interview, an assessment tool, and an intensive process that goes on in the time that a student spends with them. So I was first unaware of the problem, but second, unaware of just how well designed and effective their solution is. So you want to be able to tell both of those in the awareness phase. Now, the interest phase is really, okay, I wasn't aware of the problem. Let me learn a little more about the organization. And this is when you tell, people, hey, this is, the number of kids that we serve, the challenges that we're trying to nail down in more specific terms, when you talk about who your partners are and the things that help make you the organization that you are. Then going into the decision phase, that's really when you talk about impact, because I, as a donor, I like all the things that you're doing, and then you tell me that you've had, this impact on X number of kids during your, the time that you've been in existence. And finally, you call them to action. You ask them to donate, to volunteer, to come to an event, to participate in the 5K, all of those things. And then finally, they reach the top of the pyramid, the ambassador. The reason that we look at an inverted pyramid is the pyramid tends to give us an idea that there's, gravity pulling people through. That's not the case. You're actually pushing them upwards as they go through each of the hurdles. So, this model is used, and you can certainly use it for planning any of your events, any of your communications. It should be used on the website. It can be used there very effectively. So now, we'll get back to your point here, but there's an old saying in marketing. This goes back, the almost 30 years I've been in the business, and all the way back to when I was a child. The money is in the list. For your individual donors, email has the highest return on investment. To capitalize on that, there are a couple things that you need to do. First is segmentation. So when you look at the Kids Notes list, we've gone through and looked at, I mentioned earlier, Wake County versus Durham County versus Orange County. So, but your question was, how would you take the personas and then change the email? That's really personalization. So what we want to do is, if you are, a Durham County resident, then it's unlikely you're going to drive all the way to Wake County for an event. It's unlikely that you have the same relationship with a local school where the kids are getting their music lessons. And so you'd want to know about things that are going on close to you, in your community, and the immediate impact that it has. So we would focus on that within a particular email campaign in Durham versus Wake versus Orange County.
And is that to do some of the things like you were talking about in the previous slide in terms of raising awareness or increasing their interest to kind of move them kind of step by step along the pyramid that you created, or?
Yeah, so this is when you're moving them from interest to decision and call to action. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are different types of emails that you send. Maybe if you get really sophisticated. I don't want to go quite that sophisticated for this conversation. That's really something that once we get into technical assistance, you can start building that part of it out. But the idea is that during the course of within the email communication, you can personalize information that's relevant for their prior behaviors, how much they've donated, for their specific behaviors. So if they are in a market that is closer to you, or if they have come to events, you can send them a different email that reflects those things, and that helps you build a relationship with that particular donor. You already personalize grant applications to some degree, because you're not going to, probably won't send the same grant application to everyone. There are general parts of the template that you talk about, the organization and structure, but, you can actually, start to talk more specifically and address, questions and answers. So give me 1 second, my voice.
While you're taking care of your voice there, we do have a question. So in addition to a logo, how important is a tagline?
Excellent question. Taglines are always important. Taglines are memory hooks. So if you think about Nike, for example, Nike's brand positioning is authentic athletic performance. That is really a mission statement for their marketing. But their tagline is just do it. It's quick, it's sharp, and it's easy for you to remember. So what you're when you're going back to, awareness, once someone learns about your organization, you want to have something to keep it top of mind. And that's where taglines have the power to do that. So after you knock out the segmentation and some personalization with the list, it's important that the list is a clean list. There are three things within data hygiene. The first is that you have current information for everyone. Obviously, you know, things are going to change. You know, if it's a work email, people change jobs, that sort of stuff. They may have moved. You know, we've got a Kids Notes donor who lives in Milpitas, California, but he was, you know, a diehard supporter in Durham, loves the organization and still, you know, sends stuff. So we send him, you know, stuff out there and paper notes to thank you. That is correct. So, you know, occasionally there's, you know, something that gets transposed, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes a bit of an issue to communicate with them, and then that it's complete. So if any of you have ever, you know, downloaded something offline and they ask for contact information, I'm certainly not the only person that has put in my phone number. It's 1-2-3-4-5-6-7-8-9-0 to avoid getting a phone call within 5 minutes. What you want to do is, you know, look through and create some of the forms and the information that you have that requires, you know, valid phone numbers and email addresses and those sorts of things. And then when you confirm them on a mailing list, you send them a confirmation. So it's a double opt-in, but it ensures that you at least have, you know, name and email address. Hopefully over time, you'll be able to get more information from them as you build a relationship. But the last thing that you want to have in any of your email communications is, you know, really why they should donate. So, you know, when I think about Kids Notes and we talk about, you know, when we go beyond our value proposition, we go, you know, deeper into our brand and our tagline, collaborate, inspire, change. We talk about, you know, 3 blocks. The first is, you know, playing an instrument is the best the best workout for cognitive development, according to the neuroscience departments at Duke, at Stanford, at Vanderbilt, at Rice. Part 2 of that is we're really creating a growth mindset, as Carolyn Dweck researched extensively and has talked about, because these are kids who are displaying competence and eventually mastery of instruments that they probably wouldn't have picked up in other circumstances. And then Jim Johnson over at the Keenan School of Private Enterprise has researched extensively the presence of a third or intervening institution when young people exceed beyond what their circumstances might indicate. So when you bring those 3 things together, you have this powerful story of why someone should donate. On one hand, you have, you know, kids playing symphonic instruments, and that's easy to get someone's attention. I mean, we had a 69% email open rate, 69, with 5,000 people on the list. But adding these other blocks has been extremely powerful because it's a compelling story of the impact that you have, or that we have as an organization. Now, there are a few types of campaigns that you can run, and this just is an email. This is, you know, across all the digital world. They're engagement campaigns. So they're fun things that you do, you know, sharing pictures of you at the event, you know, if you had the 5K, sharing pictures of you at, you know, the fundraising event, those kinds of things. There's the, you know, revenue campaign. So, you know, you can always have the board members engage in social media. You know, Facebook has a, you know, great tool for creating these types of campaigns. It can all be part of, you know, your annual campaign. We're all familiar with that. But I think the one that kind of slips away from a lot of people is re-engagement. Lapsed donors are the best source of revenue. Historically, the retention rate was 5 years ago was about 50%. It is trending down to, you know, 46% with the last studies that I saw, and really only 20% of new donors will repeat their gift. So creating effective email campaigns, specifically targeted at lapsed donors. You know, over at Kids Notes, we use the Duke MBA students through the Fuqua on Board program. And we tasked them a year and a half ago with doing this type of analysis, because we wanted to, you know, continue to deepen that relationship, because we've changed as an organization. And, you know, to show them that, you know, your donation 4 years ago helped us do X. But now, you know, we've added more teachers and more students in Wake County. We've expanded to Orange County. we've had these, wonderful accomplishments by the musicians. And so we want to come back and re-engage you and ask you for more financial support. So some of my favorite tools. I realize this is a lot of stuff. And for, if you're running a nonprofit, up to your ears. I completely understand. I'm a small business person, completely get it. One of the biggest things challenges I hear from nonprofits with their marketing is, I got to get my website right. I've got to find a web developer. Well, actually, you don't have to find a web developer anymore. You've probably heard of Wix and Weebly and Squarespace. Webflow is an amazing tool. It is extraordinarily easy to use. It is well crafted. It is affordable, and you can make beautiful websites in short order. There's startups that have built this, and there's an entire trend within the technology ecosystem for no-code tools. You can go and build, mobile apps, websites. There's a bunch of stuff that can happen in the background that will empower you to build much more effective technology applications without ever writing a line of code. You can tell from my shirt, I actually do code. Hello World is a big part of it, but I love the tool. If you are doing some type of social justice work, right now, Buffer Pro is free to you. They announced the campaign last week. They are committed to this, and it's a great tool for managing social media. You can get, obviously schedule your posts, that kind of stuff, but also grab analytics and see just how effectively that your audience is engaged, or how deeply your audience is engaged. Google Analytics, absolutely love it, because you can tell how you acquired a visitor to your site, what they did on your site, and the last piece of this, and it's by far the most important, did they convert? If you are bringing people to your site and you want them to make donations electronically, you can set up Google Analytics to track the path that they took to get to your donation page and to show you if they completed your donation page. So you want to understand what that path is and optimize that, because the smoother it is and the less friction you have, the more effectively you can raise money. MailChimp, free version, for smaller lists is terrific. There are other great tools out there. I happen to like MailChimp because, they're really transparent. They've been forward thinking with a lot of the stuff they've done to build their community. And they're feature rich. And then Pipedrive, which is a customer relationship management tool. It's also really affordable. You don't have to, go to that level. A lot of you, I'm sure, have spreadsheets or maybe, some type of database, but to really get serious about the fundraising and start to track all of the behaviors that you need in order to personalize the emails and personalize your campaigns, you're going to need some type of CRM that allows you to track and tag the behaviors. And then last thing, resources. So I will tell you the book Business Model Generation is a terrific book to help you, really think through how you are innovating and creating an organization. The second book in that series, Value Proposition Design, as you can tell from my remarks earlier, the value prop is critical. So it's really about matching the value prop and the customer segment and how to understand and define both. The ad-free brand, which is, I mentioned, is the guys who did the initial branding work at Red Hat. Red Hat is started out with this idea of, we're going to give away software code, which was unheard of. And, it was sold for $35 billion last year. So, there's a lot of stuff that nonprofits can do. And the Redwoods Group is featured prominently within the book. And then Sell More Faster is written by the managing director of Techstars Austin, but it's designed to help you. It's not about, killer closing lines and prospecting as much. It's really about defining those 3 questions that I mentioned to you, and having those nailed down will give you a ton of power in becoming more effective across marketing, across branding, and across fundraising. So I will say one last thing about this. The business model canvas, you can use that for any event that you do. If it's a 5K, if it's a banquet, if it's a performance, grab that and use that to innovate and iterate and to ideate so you can create cooler stuff. I would love to work with all of you. If you haven't registered with the national organization to get the TA hours, please do. Please do. I think this is incredibly important work, especially at this time in our country. The mentoring relationships, I was the benefit of some fantastic mentors, even now. And so it's important for me to do this, and I'm prioritizing this work because I firmly believe it. So that's the information I had to formally share. If you got questions, please toss them in. I think Charmaine or Ramondo, are we going to open up the microphones for the questions now?
It should be possible if people raise their hand. And while we're waiting for some questions, Frank, I also wanted to point out to folks that through Mentor North Carolina, mentoring and youth development organizations can ask for free technical assistance, including specifically asking for help from you if marketing, fundraising, those kind of sustainability issues are something you want. So it's a nice thing that it's actually a grant. It's something that's paid for by a grant. Because as you pointed out, I think most nonprofits are working with too few resources and too few people, and when they can find someone like you that can help them move faster forward with an area of expertise, particularly when it's of no cost, that's a great value proposition for small organizations.
Value proposition. Oh, okay. I like that, but free 99. You can't beat that price. You can only match it. But like I said, I certainly am prioritizing this work. It's important work to be done right now, and I'd love to work with all of you. So I keep seeing. Are we getting some questions in, or?
Yeah, we got a couple of questions. So the first one from Larry Campbell is, what do you think of Salesforce as a capability to assist nonprofits?
I work with Salesforce an awful lot. It is Salesforce, so there are pluses and minuses. On the plus side, it's got a terrific nonprofit module, and it's well built. The flip side is it can be a bear to manage. So unless you have competency within the organization, you have to go out and find it. I will tell you that at Kids Notes, we migrated from 3 systems over to Salesforce about 4 years ago to handle our donor management, to track our instruments, to track the hours of our teaching artists. I had to beg a nonprofit, a consultancy to do the project for us. It has worked pretty well, and we had the person inside the organization who worked with it, has done great. And so from that standpoint, I think it's a great tool. I'd be careful though, because there's a ton of sprawl, and Salesforce requires a lot of time and expertise to deploy.
So I got another question, and I think this is an interesting one considering North Carolina. So the question has to do, this all sounds great for well-populated areas, but what recommendations or how does this apply to folks that are running programs in rural areas?
That's a great question. So I will tell you, I'm originally from Kinston. So I am well aware of areas that aren't as well populated and the challenges that they face. My mother built an art center in Kinston, and at one point she had an annual festival that Coca-Cola underwrote. Julius Erving was a guest. Jane Kennedy, who, if you have some gray hair, I'm sure, Bud, you remember her from her days as a CBS sportscaster. I would say that all of these things are even more important in rural communities, because understanding the value proposition that you provide is going to be a key thing for reaching out to grantors who can give you that foundation. And once you get that foundation going, then you can start to engage more people in communities surrounding you and to tailor messages to them. But yeah, I firsthand grew up watching these tools. I didn't know them at that stage of my life, but watching these tools in play to build a healthy nonprofit in rural Eastern North Carolina.
So it really sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, you really have to know who your audience is, and so well that you're satisfying some kind of need of theirs, that it's some kind of like, you're making a match of like a win-win. And it's the same process in terms of rural areas, that you can't just assume that something that's going to work in Charlotte is going to work if you're, in Bertie County or a different place in North or South Carolina.
I think, well, to the earlier part of your question, sure, your customer segment is going to be different, but understanding what value that you're delivering to them and how it impacts them from a service perspective. But the same thing for your donors. You want to make sure that your donors understand those things, and you have a clear value proposition that you're articulating to them. And the same thing for granting organizations. I mean, if I think strategically for a moment, you establish your core base of engagement and the core services you deliver and how you message that. And while you have a parallel path of seeking grants from large organizations, and there are parts of the state that are willing to write grants for small parts of small towns in North Carolina. And then you do the same thing with cultivating a funding base locally. And so by having clear, crisp messages that resonate with those folks, you're not going to raise the same amount of money that you do in Charlotte as easily, or that we're able to do in Durham. But I'll tell you, we've got plenty of Kids Notes donors that are, up near Elizabeth City, outside of Morehead City, some that come from Rocky Mount and Wilson, and they've written, pretty healthy donations.
Yep. Frank, could you go back to the slide that had some of the different platforms? I think some people wanted to make sure they could write those down, so that they knew about those. So I also, if other people have other questions, we're keeping an eye on those. But Frank, I had a question for you, going back to your Morton Salt example. So on one level, like, how do you help like a mentoring organization or youth development organization? On one level, they could just sound like, well, you're just another mentoring organization. There's 12 in the region or something like that. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing that helps them differentiate themselves, to make them really kind of pop out from the competition? Because we don't like to talk about it in the nonprofit sector, but I call it co-opetition. There's times when you're collaborating, but there's also times when you're directly competing, and we don't like to admit that. But it's very true. And one of the ways to try to put yourself on a better position is to somehow differentiate yourself. So I'm kind of hearing that broad thing, but how do you help a nonprofit do that so that they don't just sound like another Kroger Salt?
Yeah, so there are a few things. So when you're working on a brand, and this is actually a really good conversation for going into a technical assistance project, but you look at your key points of differentiation and the similarities. And what you're really trying to hone in on is what makes you different and the impact that you have. Now, mentoring organizations, that's a really big umbrella. So if you're working with, kids, I mean, just like I mentioned earlier, the organization of 100 Black Men, Triangle East, is going to have a different brand than, Boomerang will. And so, looking at who you serve them, how you serve them, and, what you're able to deliver and the impact you deliver, you have to translate that into a different set of results. Because, there's sports, there's mentoring stuff, the Dons basketball league, there's specific kids that he's going to work with. And so I think creating that, and then, but the other thing I would recommend is, when you have a success story, grab onto it and seize it. With Kids Notes, we have our principal cellist has done remarkable things for the organization. He's played with the LA Philharmonic. He played with a music festival in Scotland. And if you go to watch the Kids Notes documentary on YouTube, it was actually partially underwritten by, or it was done by a video producer over at SAS. But he played in the Nasher for that. But he became kind of the face of Kids Notes. And so it was easy to appreciate, and he was different than, because there are other organizations that give music lessons in this area. They're few in Durham, they're, some in Raleigh. We certainly, know them and have interacted with them. I mean, there's one in Chapel Hill where students, go and work with kids and they give them music lessons. But, we've really focused on how we've taken, these ideas and these principles I shared with everyone and applied them. And, Armstrong McGuire, says we're the gold standard for marketing in the Triangle.
Yep. Well, we're getting close to the end here. So a couple of things. One is that if you're interested in working with Frank or interested in learning more about other kinds of free technical assistance you can get, one is you can email me. So that's blavery@mentornc.org. I can send you the link. You can also find the link directly for the technical assistance request at the National Mentoring Resource Center. But we can get you all those kinds of information in terms of doing it. Frank, I want to appreciate your taking the time to kind of walk through everyone doing this. Most folks who are in the nonprofit sector don't come to it with a marketing background. It's skills that they either have to pick up or they have to bring in from the outside. So I really appreciate your time. Any closing thoughts that you have for the folks on our call?
No, are we getting a couple more questions in just at the end there? Because I saw.
I'm seeing lots of thanks. So there's a lot of appreciation.
Yeah. So if it's just thanks, then I would say, I appreciate all the work that everyone who joined the video conference is doing. It is certainly important work, and I wish you guys all the best to stay healthy and to stay safe during this time. And I encourage all of you to go ahead and get registered and, give me a shout. I'd love to, create a terrific marketing plan for all of your organizations, regardless of where you are in North Carolina, and to help you continue to grow and build.
Before we sign off, actually, it does say, like, Charmaine, you said there's one more question, and I'm trying to look through the chat to help find that. It's actually specific about there's a West Coast organization called the Vitamin String Quartet that someone's recently partnered with through voice music app Voicey. They're interested in visiting and servicing the Durham area because of its rich culture. I hesitate to invite them because there's so many nonprofits in our area. However, there doesn't seem to be a lot of cross collaboration in the arts. Any recommendations? I'd be open to advice.
Any recommendations for folks to partner with? You know what? Actually, let me reach out to. We've got a meeting this evening with Kids Notes. If you'll follow up with Bud and send him the name of the organization and the other stuff, I'll get the right people to partner with in the Triangle, and we'll get that conversation going.
Great suggestion. Again, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Charmaine and Raimundo, for hosting in the background for us. And I really appreciate everyone's participation today. Everyone have a really good afternoon, and I hope that you guys stay safe. And thank you. Take care.
Take care.